Hello and welcome to this special IBTTA webinar on artificial intelligence and cybersecurity in the tolling industry. I'm Susan Mowers, IT manager at the Thousand Islands Bridge Authority, and I'm thrilled to be co-hosting today's session with Bob Legata. Bob?
Thanks, Susan. I'm Bob Legata with Atkins Realis, and I've been working in the tolling industry for quite a few years. Today's session is part of a broader effort by the IBTTA Artificial Intelligence Machine Learning Committee to explore how emerging technologies like AI and machine learning are shaping the future of tolling, especially in the critical area of cybersecurity.
This is a pre-recorded message followed by a panel discussion. Thank you, and let's proceed on.
Our first presenter will be Dr. Varol Kaihan. Dr. K, you want to start with our presentations?
Absolutely. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. My name is Varol Kaihan, and I'm an associate professor at the University of South Florida. I teach machine learning, and I also do research in cybersecurity using machine learning. So I have a lot of ground to cover in the first 10 minutes. So let me go ahead and get started by sharing my screen and talk a little bit about what machine learning is all about. So hope everybody's seeing my screen. Now, what I'm going to do is in the next few minutes, I have a lot of topics to talk about. But first things, I'm going to talk about what machine learning is all about. Then I will switch to what it means to undertake a machine learning project. Then I'm going to talk about my own research area, briefly about anomaly detection, which is a really important topic in cybersecurity. And then I will conclude with some takeaways. So let's go ahead and get started. What is machine learning? What does it mean when somebody says, I'm doing a machine learning project? This idea of machine learning is extremely simple. It is basically identifying patterns in data. And by the way, I like writing on my slides. So if you see me scribbling on slides, that's me. So machine learning is nothing but identifying patterns in data. So I'll tell you this. At the end of this webcast, if somebody asked you and said, you sat through this webcast for an hour, what did you learn? What is your takeaway? This should be your takeaway. Machine learning is all about identifying patterns in data, period. Now, what do you do with those patterns? You use those patterns later on to make predictions. And I'm going to talk about that with some examples in the next few minutes. Now, when I talk about data, we have two types of data in machine learning: structured data and unstructured data. Structured data we are already familiar with. All of us use on a day-to-day basis. It's just a simple Excel table, if you will, with rows and columns. And these days, though, we use unstructured data to build machine learning models, which we call AI, by the way. And those are the ChatGPT-like applications. So today, I'm going to be giving you examples in terms of the structured data sets. Now, let me go into a very quick example. Phishing. We all are a victim of phishing, and we know how it works. We know how effective it is. And I was looking at Gmail's spam filter, phishing filter, and I noticed that they claim that they actually detect 99% of the 99.9% of spam, phishing, and malware. And I noticed that they say it is powered by machine learning. And I said, okay, what are they looking at when they are detecting phishing emails? They said they look at the domain reputation, IP reputation, authentication, and finally, sending patterns. I said, there you go. Now we see that they are actually talking about patterns in a real world application. And then I said, okay, what kind of patterns are we talking about here? And most importantly, what does that data set look like? So let's go with this example. First things first, what should the data set look like? Here, I can take a bunch of emails and I can structure them as a structured data set. Be careful. I create a table with rows and columns out of maybe thousands of emails that my company gets every day. Now, see what I did. In the first column, I have the sender's email, then I have subject, then I have the content of the email, and toward the end, I have the type of this email, whether it is legitimate or not. Now, as soon as I construct this table, then I have a structured data set that I can build machine learning models off of. Now, this was the data part. what about the patterns part? Now I can see with naked eye that there could be 2 patterns at a minimum over here. Now, when you say that an email is phishing, I can see that the sender has some real weird characters in the sender email. So there could be some numeric characters, for example. Same in this box, if you look at it carefully. So when an email looks like it is phishing, there's some extra characters and extra numbers in the sender email. So that could be one pattern that we can see just with naked eye. The other one is this brown box, which is the urgency. You have to do it now. You have to do it immediately. Otherwise, you're going to be suspended, right? We have seen all these emails every day. So the other pattern that we can observe in this specific data set is, and this is not universal, by the way, in this specific data set is urgency. So these keywords could be some of the trigger or patterns for phishing related emails. So now we know that machine learning is identifying patterns. We know the type of data set, and now we know what kind of patterns we're working with. Then, this is all about what machine learning is about. Now, let's take a look at what it means to undertake a machine learning project. Now, if you wanted to do one of these projects, first things first, you need to conceptualize the problem as an input-output problem. We call this supervised learning. So the goal then of an algorithm is to find patterns between inputs and outputs and use those patterns to make predictions. I'm going to show an example in a few minutes, following through with the same example. But most importantly, you must have historical data on both inputs and the output. So let's continue with the same example. First things first, I must collect data from past emails from what I have observed before that I know are phishing. So this is where that type column becomes extremely important. I collect data from my own organization's server. I collect all of these emails, structure them as a table, and now I know which one is legitimate and which one is phishing. That is the first step. The next step then is I need to identify what is input and what is output. I must do this for machine learning algorithms. Only then can I build models. In here, the inputs become the email's attributes. What is the sender's email? What is the subject of this email? What is the content? My output then becomes my own label I created. Are these emails legitimate or are they phishing? This I must do. I must go through each of these email examples one by one, and I must classify them to say, are they legitimate or are they phishing? So this step I must do before building any kind of machine learning model. Then I show these inputs and output to an algorithm. The algorithm identifies patterns between the inputs and outputs, and it literally does this. It goes through each example and then says, okay, if this person is telling me that there's an email associated as phishing or labeled as phishing, can I see some pattern with respect to that one? It might say, yeah, I can see the pattern. When they say something is phishing, I see extra numbers in that sender's email. So again, just like we identified before, the algorithm is identifying the exact same pattern. Then it might also say, okay, I found another pattern. When they tell me that something is phishing, I see some keywords immediate now that I do not see in other examples. So the algorithm goes through each example one by one, their label and some of the patterns, and it tries to find these one at a time. There could be more patterns in my data set that I might not be able to see with my own naked eye, but the algorithm will be able to figure these things out. That's why they become extremely powerful these days. So once that is done, I call that model a trained model now. So my algorithm is trained to distinguish between what is legitimate and what is phishing. Now I can use those patterns to my advantage. Here's what I can do. Let me identify a brand new email, which I do not know the type. I have no idea if it is legitimate or phishing. I can send this directly to my trained model. The trained model will look at each of these columns now and will try to find the patterns it associates with phishing. And then it says, I could not find any of those patterns in this specific example. You see, the email doesn't have those extra numerical characters. There are no keywords such as now, immediate, or urgent. And then it says, yeah, I do not see those patterns in here, so this looks legitimate. There you go. We built our own machine learning phishing detector in just a few minutes. Now, this whole process I outline here, it looks like a three-step process. You prepare your data first. You obtain the data, clean and transform your data. You label your data. What does that mean? You identify what is phishing versus what is legitimate. Then you train your model, which means you send the data to the machine learning algorithm to find those patterns between the inputs and the output. Then you deploy your model, which means that now you're able to send your inputs to this model to generate those outputs that we just went through. Now, it looks like a very simple three-step process, but in reality, it is actually much more detailed in nature. So this is what we usually teach in our regular machine learning classes. You got to define the problem. You need to get the data. You need to prepare the data for machine learning. And I got to tell you, this portion takes 80% of your machine learning project. Then you got to train your model, evaluate what model is the best or what algorithm is the best, select the best performing model and deploy. And it doesn't even end there. Sometimes you got to go back to the beginning, revise your problem and repeat the whole process all over again. Now, be careful though. Not every organization who wants to undertake these projects can be successful. There are so many stories in the news that many organizations failed. There's several reasons. Most organizations undertake these projects because they think they should do it because others are doing it. There might not be a need even for machine learning. They are just jumping on the bandwagon. Two, there's widespread difficulty in understanding use cases. What does that mean? People do not know how to conceptualize the problem into an input-output problem. They don't know how to identify the inputs, what is the output. So that's a big problem in machine learning. And three, most importantly, you might not have any skilled workforce. You might not have any employees who might be able to pull this off. So you need to be careful when you want to undertake machine learning projects. Now, we talked about what it means to undertake a machine learning project. Let me talk a little bit about anomaly detection, which is my line of research in cybersecurity. I'm not going to spend too much time on it, just a few slides, and then we will take a look at some of the takeaways. Now, what is anomaly detection? I specifically focus on unsupervised anomaly detection here. What does that mean? It means sometimes you do not have a label. You do not know which example is good, which example is bad. So let's revisit our phishing example. Remember, this was my table, right? And I had the type column right there. I individually labeled which email was legitimate, which email was phishing. Imagine I do not have that. So think of this. I have 1 million emails that I would like to analyze, and I do not have the time to go through each of them and say, this looks good, this doesn't look good. I do not have time to do that. Then my goal is, again, construct this table, but then show it to an algorithm so that the algorithm can find those observations that do not look like others. So that's the main goal in anomaly detection, especially unsupervised anomaly detection. Now, it might still look at the entire set of columns and say, okay, let me try to see which ones are standing out among others. And then it might still find these two to say, okay, these two don't look similar to others because there's extra characters in them in the sender email. There's extra numbers in them. So we can clearly see the pattern again here. So this is the anomaly detection component of machine learning. Now, mind you, we had another one, phishing email right there. It might slip through in anomaly detection because I didn't necessarily say, hey, learn the patterns in this one because it is also phishing. Now it's trying to find the ones that don't look like others. And obviously things will slip through. So this is one of the challenges of anomaly detection. So what is anomaly detection in general? It is identifying patterns that deviate from expected behavior. It can be rule-based or machine learning driven. It can be used on numeric or text-based data sets, and it has its own challenges. Malicious actors constantly adapt their behaviors to look like they are normal behaviors. So you're constantly fighting against a moving target. It might also generate too many false positives, which can generate alert fatigue, where people start ignoring the anomalies being detected. Now, that is obviously a very short coverage of anomaly detection, but that's a long, very long and detailed topic. So let's move on to our takeaways. Only one slide, I promise. So here are some important takeaways if you would like to do machine learning projects in your organization. For machine learning, or in order to do these types of projects, you must have a very good understanding of the context. If you do not know the context, your machine learning projects are not going to be successful. You must have access to good and historical data sets. So it must be high quality data sets. If you do not have access to high quality data sets in your own domain or context, then obviously your efforts will not be successful. You must be able to access a platform. This can be paid or open source. There are very good open source platforms these days that can help you do machine learning for free. So you must have access to one of these platforms, and you must have skilled personnel with innovative and creative thinking. I cannot emphasize this last component more. So you must have really creative thinking abilities to make these projects work for you. So that's all about it. Hopefully it was informative and a good primer for machine learning. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Dr. K. And now we're going to have Vinny from TCA in California, who's going to cover the executive perspective.
Okay, thank you. Let me go ahead and try and share my screen so we have something to look at there. That should do it. Okay. All right. Well, good morning, afternoon, and evening, everyone. Vinny Valdez, Chief Toll Operations Officer for the Transportation Corridor Agencies, better known as TCA, located here in Irvine, California. Just a real quick background on our agency, who we are. We are actually two agencies, hence the name Transportation Corridor Agencies, plural. And we're a traditional toll facility here. We were formed back in 1986 here in Orange County. We collected our first tolls in 1996. Today, we operate 4 toll roads, 77 lanes. We have 51 centerline miles. We process about 100 million transactions a year. We're budgeted for $400 million in toll revenue this year. We boast 2.85 million, so closing in on 3 million patron accounts. And then importantly, as of last year, we began processing transactions for a neighboring toll agency, San Bernardino County Transportation Authority, or SBCTA. So there are about 10 million additional transactions on top of our 100 million. So from a perspective of a tolling agency, right? My talk today will be decidedly less technical, right? It's more of a senior leadership or executive point of view, and from our perspective, why is cybersecurity a top concern? Well, is it a thing, right? How concerned should we be about it? And our answer is you should be very concerned about it and take it as a real thing. Why? Because so much is at stake, right? As tolling agencies, we have the ethical and oftentimes legal responsibility to protect the personally identifiable information of our customer. As I mentioned on the last slide, we have a $400 million revenue stream that we've got an obligation to protect. Toll and violation revenue is used to pay down bonds, fund our operations, and meet other obligations. Right? Similarly, our IT team here has the duty and responsibility of protecting our IT infrastructure and our data. And then lastly, we have reputation that we also have to protect. As we know, right, cyber incidents will often bring you unwanted attention, right? Negative press, and may involve a hit to your reputation, particularly if you didn't take reasonable steps to try and protect yourself. And then lastly, for us, we've got the added consideration of a processing partner, SBCTA, who trust us to safeguard their data and reputation. So again, a lot at stake. So through, again, looking at it through an operational lens, where can AI help? All right. Starts with risk mitigation. It can definitely help with that. I imagine Kyle will get more into the specifics, but from a technical perspective next. But from an operational perspective, it can help detect malicious activity and protect your infrastructure. So you want to make the application of AI a part of your strategic planning process. Using ourselves here at TCA as the example, we recently went through a SWOT exercise, right? Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats exercise, and that effort yielded some opportunities to deploy AI. In our case, it was more about opportunities to increase operational efficiencies, right? But it just as easily can identify opportunities to harden your cybersecurity defenses, right? Another opportunity for identifying opportunities for AI is to have a consultant come in and work with you to identify these opportunities. As I'll keep mentioning this point through my talk here, right? Not having folks on your team that are experts in AI is not an excuse, right? To not do anything, right? You can. There are definitely opportunities to partner. There are folks out there with expertise, some on this very in this very session here, that can work with you. Okay. And then anyway, once you get to your opportunities being identified, right, your next step is work them into your budget, right? Whether it's AI deployments for efficiencies or for cybersecurity protection, you want to make sure not to miss the opportunities to include these costs in your budget and make them part of your plan. And then lastly, execution, right? TCA, for example, again, using ourselves as the example here, we recently researched and deployed a firewall upgrade that incorporates AI to detect malicious activity and block it. So what else can you do? Important is creating and maintaining board level awareness, right? I'd suggest, in fact, I do so very strongly, that the first conversation with your board about cybersecurity not be after an incident occurs, right? So whether it's during the budgeting process or in the appropriate committee, let them know that you are taking proactive steps to protect your agency. That may become important if, in fact, you do have an incident, right? You're more likely to get their support, right? If they, before the incident, are already comfortable that reasonable steps are being taken to protect the agency. Right? Then, next suggestion there would be industry-wide collaboration. So whether it's with your neighboring toll agency or with a industry-wide organization, my strong recommendation from an operational senior leadership perspective would be work with other entities on the challenges of AI and cybersecurity, and don't try and go it alone. Okay, towards that end, I'm also an IBTTA board member, so I'd be remiss if I didn't, mention the fact that IBTTA itself has a role to play, right? IBTTA hosts panels at its meetings, which are opportunities for agency staff to collaborate and learn about what other agencies are doing and what our best practices. In fact, this AI and machine learning strike force, right, puts a narrower focus on education in this space, like we're doing today. Okay. In any event, the key takeaway here, don't go it alone. Share, right? Share your knowledge, share your tools, share your best practices. That is definitely the preferred, stronger way to, deal with cybersecurity and threats in today's world, especially in our industry here, tolling industry. Okay, so thanks. That's my presentation. Thanks for the opportunity to speak today, and enjoy the rest of the session.
All right.
Thank you.
I'll go next. Oh, sorry, Susan, go ahead.
It's okay. Our next segment is presented by Kyle Psyche, and he's going to talk to us about engineering and real-world application. Thanks,
Yeah.
Kyle.
All right, thanks for that, Vinny. So my name is Kyle Psyche. I am the senior security engineer at E470 in Colorado, located on the east side of Denver. We have about 47 miles of toll roads, so we have a high volume of people that travel across every day, as well as a high volume of income as well. So very important to us that cybersecurity and AI is at the forefront of what we do. Part of the biggest problem that we've had, like everybody else in the continental United States, is we've been subject to our sites and toll road sites being mimicked by smishing, right? So what happened with that is, what we're getting is kind of like piecemeal type of identifiers within it. Everybody's kind of working on their own little island, if you will. Express Toll organization as a whole kind of works in little fiefdoms, if you will. When I got on board last year, we weren't exactly the best at sharing intelligence. And so with that, what I started was a security group, toll road security group, basically to exchange information. So within that, not only the communication across toll roads, but improving our communication related to these smishing attacks internally, right? So within that, what I would do is reach out to my organization and say, hey, no matter what you think, when you get a suspected smish, especially anything dealing with the toll road, please forward it. So this kind of goes into, Dr. K's, process and explaining that, hey, with a good data set of information, you can really start to learn with that. So, with that side of it, started collecting a lot of smishes. But, with that came also some other issues. So what was going on is, having that FBI background that I have, I worked there for about 10 years as a digital media exploitation analyst in the counterterrorism division. So it was a lot of backtracking, using open source information within it. There's a lot of great tools out there on the internet these days that you're able to find out a lot of information. But within that, you're also identifying a lot of things that you also can't mitigate. So information wasn't always necessarily a problem. It was what's that next step. So as you can see on the left here of the slide is we are receiving a smish. Somebody internally is then sending it to me. And with that, you have some variables here where they're mimicking our site as expresstoll.com, but they have this hyphenated, different alpha characters. So they have 3 different alpha characters there. Now with that, they're running a domain generating algorithm, a DGA. So on top of that, as I'm finding these sites, I'm able to pivot and find additional sites with that, right? So it's not so much that our problem is identifying some of these smishes, right? Because on top of what I'm identifying here, the actors are also utilizing kits where they're using that alpha or alphanumeric, even if you will. And in this case, it's 3 different digits, right? So 3 different alphanumeric, 26 cubed. Within that, that's just using lowercase. Maybe they're using uppercase as well. You're having a hard time getting to that next step with it. So we're identifying a sliver of all that information. Now, what are we doing with it? First step, most cybersecurity offices, you find a site, a lot of time it's a one-off. It's not so much in volume, but on top of that, you're also dealing with ISPs, internet service providers that are located globally. So here within this issue, myself, a couple other toll road agency cybersecurity personnel as well that I've CC'd on it and said, okay, here we've identified a list. This isn't the exact same list as the previous one, but this is just another example, right? So it's something where we have to create correspondence now to these ISPs. On top of that, I'm not a native, Mandarin speaker. So within that, I have to put it through something like Google Translate. Is it getting correct? Once again, we're reaching out, but at the same time, we're also not getting any response. So as these attacks are continuing on and on and on, I'm working in a piecemeal manner as well as sort of the other cybersecurity personnel. So, as we're trying to attempt to identify and mitigate this data, get the messaging out that this is actually, fake, get it taken down, exponentially that list keeps growing of malicious sites. So what do we do in turn, right? So I'm not going to mention any names of vendors, but being completely agnostic and utilizing whatever tools you can, identified a particular vendor where they have an AI-driven platform that can really look into this and identify that as well, right? So on my side, where I'm able to identify and provide those lists, there's some bulk submissions that we can request, right? At that same time, their AI engine on the back end is going and saying, is this a new site? Let's go take it down. On top of that, they have a working relationship with many foreign ISPs. So not only is that AI, as soon as I'm entering bulk data, is it going and reaching out, it's able to contact that ISP with somebody they already have an established relationship with. They're able to then in turn go and identify those sites and name it to the ISP and say, please take this down. So with that, so you have the rapid takedown of it, scalable protection of brands. So where we get into a lot of that also is that automated threat detection. I know I have a lot of things here, but they're able to then say, hey, we have a regular expression, right? Meaning we can match and say, in our instance, the billing portion of it is ExpressToll. So expresstoll.com, with these domain names and DNS registrations on the websites, on the content of the structure, they can go and say, hey, expresstoll.com is good, but expresstoll.com hyphen ABC is incorrect. It's wrong. There's just no way. With that, they could reach back out and say, we've identified these sites. Is this indeed, legitimate or is it malicious? Within that, we also have the capability with the screenshots and on the visual similarities of legitimate sites. So they can identify when somebody actually scrapes the site and puts up that image, which happens quite often because they're trying to mimic, obviously, the pay site of our page. On top of it, further identified where they are pushing Initially, they have the actual site where you go to and you enter your credit card information and get spoofed. But on the back end, they're using a completely innocuous site. In our situation, it's a Canadian shoe company where they continuously put images, but on the back side is where they're actually storing all the victims' credit cards. So with that, we're able to go identify both those sides, right? So the pay site that's fake, as well as where they're storing their information with it. On top of that, they had a large language model monitoring. So, they found that some of the chatbots inadvertently recommend phishing sites as you go and say, hey, is this a legitimate site? Is this not a legitimate site? So a lot of power with them having the automation versus, us working piecemeal on the other side of it. Okay, so operational impact. So here, this is a 30-day window of when we actually started implementing that data and working in tandem, utilizing their machine learning, their AI. What's going on is, initially, and we're just one of the smaller slivers out of the entire ExpressTool group. So imagine we're covering 1% to 2%, whereas might have somebody out east that's covering 88% of the volume. But even just within our numbers with that, right, we're able to start taking down high volume of sites. So in less than 30 days, we were able to have them take down 351 sites that were mimicking ExpressToll alone with that. So quite a significant impact with it. Now, on top of it, they're also using that AI to continuously monitor it, because a lot of the sites that I've found that are being utilized for mimicking ExpressToll, mimicking E470, other toll roads, found some indicators as far back as 8 years ago where these sites have been utilized and parked and then reused again and then reused again and reused again. So it's a continuous problem for us, right? So if we have somebody continuously monitoring, here we have 667 within the month. Once again, 350 taken down, 97, we just ended up ignoring with that. Okay, now the big thing, of course, is cost, right? So how are we saving on costs? Operational impact within that. So this map here on the top left is actually victims or visits that I identified through a hacking and I should say smishing campaign in March, right? So happened in February, March. We started to get some traction on it. We have, around 5,000 data points within this of people that are being affected and then actually visiting those fake sites. But a big driver on that as well is the numbers you're seeing here on the text scan and smishing is our increase in workload on our customer service side. So that becomes an extreme operational impact for us because of dollars cost, dollars spent, getting FTEs in here, full-time employees, getting temporary staff to come in here, the volume of calls coming in that we're actually not even able to respond to, creating things where we're creating an ambush, if you will, where we can redirect those phone calls coming in. On top of it, we have to do it in multiple languages, primarily English and Spanish here in Colorado. But it shows that, within the smishing campaigns, it's a huge driver on cost this is just ExpressToll once again. So cost is a high driver for us. So within that, right, us utilizing, being creative, utilizing this AI as an augmentation tool to affect us. Our early estimates, now these are estimates, that it could be a cost swing by just $3 million just within that ExpressToll and E470 community. So with that, those predictions that, we're going flexing left and right, up and down within it. It gives us a lot of power and capability to say, this is indeed working, not only at the time, but also we've seen the ExpressToll smishing campaigns go way down, but we've seen it starting to uptick a little bit as well. So that means we can keep our antennas on with that. Once again, we're dealing with scams that are just everywhere across the US. Actually, they're global. But within that, we're able to really affect that type of information and data right off the bat, right? speed of the attacks. Once again, I mentioned the DGAs, the domain generating algorithms within that. Sorry. So it's outpacing our capabilities. So with that AI, it's real time. The biggest win for that is had sites identified and taken down as little as 13 minutes. The longest has been about 40 hours, so just under 2 days. So it's given us a lot of capability to create that friction, if you will, within the smishing groups and the hackers and say, hey, hands off Express-Toll. How we're kind of using it here in-house as well. Just want to add building my own little OCR, optical character recognition type of tool where the user is able to drag in an image, based on that smishing image. Once again, as Dr. K said, you have to have that good data set. So there's a lot of learning with it. So I'm implementing things like good knowns, with JSON files that say, this is only what Express Toll or anybody else at the toll road uses. Anything outside of that's going to be bad news. So with that, I yield my time. I think I'm a little over, so appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you very much for such great information. We're going to shift gears now and ask a few questions that will help us to understand more of use and how we can make this work. First question is for Dr. K. You mentioned anomaly detection and how can the agencies validate their models that they're detecting the right anomalies and not false positives?
That's a very good question, and I don't think I have a good answer for you. Here's why. When you're doing anomaly detection, you always run into the risk of producing false negatives and false positives. There is no way getting around that. Now, let me put an asterisk to that. Now, you can do anomaly detection with better accuracy if you start labeling your data. What does that mean? That goes back to my original table on the type. You have the legitimate and phishing. So if you start doing that on your data set and then say, okay, this is a good example, this is a bad example, this is a good example, this is a bad example. If you start doing that on your entire data set, then your accuracy obviously will be much better in the long run. But who has the time to do that? It is costly. You have to have dedicated people. You have to have a lot of manpower that you need a lot of manpower to do that, and it becomes extremely costly. So if you do unsupervised anomaly detection, you obviously run into the risk of false positives and false negatives. There's unfortunately no way getting around that issue because that's the nature of the machine learning approach and the model. So it is embedded, unfortunately, into the algorithm. There's not a good solution to that problem. You just need to try to reduce that alert fatigue and try to perhaps do explainable AI, and that's what my research is all about. Currently, we have a couple papers in progress that we're trying to publish them. We're trying to say, how can we make anomaly detection more explainable to people so that they can see why something is detected as an anomaly. That way, perhaps we can reduce those false negatives and false positives. But obviously, that's still academic. If you find explainable anomaly detection, which is becoming its own category, then perhaps we might be able to address that issue.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Our next question is for Vinny. Vinny, you emphasize board level awareness. What metrics or reports have been most effective in communicating cybersecurity risks to leadership?
Yeah, thanks for the question. We don't report specific metrics. Our board meetings are in an open forum, but we do speak in general terms to the proactive steps that we're taking. Like I mentioned in my presentation earlier, board members do understand very well. Our boards consist of elected officials, and they understand very well risks to a $400 million revenue stream, right? They understand risks to reputation that can come from from an incident occurring. So they'll actually, our board members will actually ask themselves. They'll ask us, right? They'll read. Usually, they'll read something in the newspaper or hear about it through an incident through word of mouth, and they come to us and staff and say, hey, what are we doing here to protect ourselves against something like that? And so we'll describe in general terms about our approach, right? That it's proactive, that we make the investments in the tools that we need. We invest in hiring firms that have specific expertise so that they can work with our IT staff to implement defenses. And they get comfort, confidence, and ultimately their support comes from that.
Thank you. The next question is for Kyle. Kyle, your AI tool uses OCR and large language models. What lessons did you learn from testing and deploying it that will help others that they should know what happened?
Yeah, well, haven't quite deployed it just yet. But the biggest thing is, definitely, once again, back to what Dr. K said, it's like that data set is key, right? Your base data, you have to have that good data set. But going beyond that, it's test, and test again, right? Once again, getting into the false positives, getting as many variables as you can to test, and then always using against those known good ones. I think another key aspect is, um, something in the sense of, perfect is the enemy of good, but in that sense, right? Like it's never going to be that perfect model, and it's okay to say that, right? Put that caveat out there, put it in front and say, because the idea of mine is something in the sense of, sure that AI tool on the front side is able to blast those websites, but we also have a large group of people or whoever gets the smash, and then you look at it and 80% of the people or even 80% of each person is going to say, I think this is garbage, this is trash, but there's that sliver that it might be legitimate. So it's that tool, like I kind of want to like fill that gap, but then I also want to express that, hey, this is looking like it's fraudulent, and this is who we think it actually is mimicking. Do you want to reach out to them? But just know that no tool is 100%, and that, almost if it's a legal liability on the front end of it, right? Because then you don't want them to say, I went to it and this said this was good, this was bad. It's just putting everything out front, I think, as far as being realistic about your tool.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is for Dr. K. Dr. K, what are some low-risk, high-reward use cases of AI in cybersecurity that tolling agencies could pilot today?
That's a very good question. So first of all, I don't know if I'm really qualified to answer that question. I think that goes back to my original point in my presentation. You have to be a real expert in order to answer that question in the domain. So I don't know if I can claim myself as an expert in the domain, but I'll tell you this. I think Kyle brought up a really interesting point in his presentation. He mentioned that one of the first things they did was they looked at rule-based systems and a very simple regular expression-based system. So I'll tell you this, AI and machine learning are rule-based systems. They generate their own rules based on the patterns that identify in the data set, right? So if we put that aside, right, if you think about machine learning and AI as too complex and put that aside, you can literally do your own rule-based system as we speak, just like how Kyle thought about it and they implement it. So any rule-based system that you can do very low risk, high reward, you can eliminate perhaps 90% of your anomalies, or maybe you will identify 80% of your phishing attempts, whatever you're looking at, whatever the use case is. So a simple use case or rule-based scenario, a rule-based methodology can actually achieve a lot of things without even getting into the sophisticated approaches or sophisticated techniques of machine learning and AI.
Thank you. Next question is for Vinny. From your perspective, how do you prioritize cybersecurity initiatives when the resources are limited and the threats are continuing to evolve, getting even more prevalent?
Sure. A few points. I'd make a few points on that, Bob. I mean, first is that, we don't compromise at all when it comes to prioritizing cybersecurity initiatives, right? Our agency makes the investments of dollars in the tools and services that's necessary to protect ourselves. For instance, we hire separate firms. We hired not one, but two firms. One to work with us on protecting our infrastructure, right? Making sure that we're using best practice when it comes to tools and methods. And then we pay a separate firm to do an annual audit, to come on in and do the testing and identify vulnerabilities. So, we make those investments. The third point I'll make is that our IT people are responsible, right, for successful remediation of any and all at least the medium to high risk vulnerabilities that are identified, right? They have to report to me. I need to see the list as an executive team sponsor, right, with responsibility. I want to see what the vulnerabilities are, that they were remediated, and agree. I want to actually agree with my IT director that any of the low risk items that aren't remediated, just as a practical matter, aren't addressed or remediated, that they really are low to zero risk items when it comes to cybersecurity. Last point I'll make, again, is to emphasize that a member of your agency's senior or executive leadership team needs to be that sponsor, right? To get to make sure that your frontline teams, whether they're IT or cybersecurity specialists, get again the resources they need to protect your agency.
That's great.
Thank you, Vinny. Our next question is for Kyle. This one is actually a very interesting question. How do you ensure your team stays ahead of emerging threats like smishing and phishing?
Yeah, good one. Fortunately for phishing and smishing, they're more than willing to provide us the latest and greatest from the real world. So, but the biggest thing with it is as far as security with the toll roads is our toll road security working group, right? Because we share quite a bit. On top of that, with the particular actors, we have once again the AI side of the house. We have some scripts running that we're able to identify it. On top of that, it also boils down to, particular indicators, whether that's a hash. There's a couple particular images that this group is using that they continuously reuse, right? So browsing the net for something just within that image, I'm able to identify like 5,000 different sites. But it's once again that, there's no silver bullet with it. Security is a process and not a product. Bruce Schneier said that. So bright guy on that, and said, it's all about that engagement. It's all about, being dynamic and knowing like there's always something else coming with it, being able to change, right?
Thank you.
Last for Dr. K, and thank you for your presentation. Dr. K, how do you see the role as academic institutions evolving in supporting public sector cybersecurity efforts like the tolling agencies?
Thank you so much. That's a very important question. I think that the collaboration between, if there's any, between academic institutions and public sector should be can be better, should increase. Here's where I'm coming from. Tolling agencies, any public sector agency can try to purchase outside resources, outside services. Obviously, they are the latest and the greatest and tested. So you can certainly get those services to create some form of protection for your organization or for your customers. But there are certain things that these services or these companies might not be able to provide. Example, explainable anomaly detection. For example, we are at the forefront of that research. We are trying to do our best to provide that kind of service. Those services might not be available off the shelf as we speak, but then anyone, any agency, or any public sector agency, so forget about just the tolling agencies, any public sector agency struggling with these issues can partner with an academic institution, and then we can develop proof of concept tools, techniques, methodologies that can solve problems which might not be able to be solved using off-the-shelf tools. So I think it is extremely important that the academic institutions should play a greater role in this endeavor. We should collaborate more. We should share more data and share the methodologies, the techniques that we develop, and then try to focus on more unique problems that might not be solved using off-the-shelf services or even some of the security companies out there. So I think we should do more, for sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So the last question for Vinny. Can you share an example of a successful partnership or collaboration that helped advance your agency's cybersecurity posture?
Sure. Yeah, in fact, I spoke at the IBTTA Tech Summit in Dallas earlier this year about an attempt at card testing that occurred on our network. When we detected that incident, we had really in-depth discussions and collaboration with our back office system provider and even our roadside system providers to assess the extent of the attempted attack. We worked with those third-party firms I mentioned earlier, one to work with us on protection, right, and detecting what happened. And then the other one, they normally do an annual audit, but we asked them to take a specific look at this case and from their perspective, identify steps they think we should take to, protect against better protect against similar attacks in the future. And then lastly, we reached out to other agencies. That's how I first met Kyle electronically. Again, we started with agencies that are right here in the Southern California area to see if they experienced anything similar, and if so, what steps did they take? And then we sort of panned out from there, going across the nation, looking to see the extent to which this was a problem for other agencies and what practices were being applied there. So we were more than happy to end up joining Kyle's group there, and our IT director participates, and I, when I can, participate today.
Thank you. And the last question for Kyle. What's your advice on agencies trying to build up their AI tools to support their protection of their agency?
I think the biggest thing is I think don't mirror image. What I mean by that is kind of a thing we used when I was in the FBI. It was a sense of like this would never happen because I don't have any personal experience with it, right? Try not to say that. Try not to, say one thing would work and one thing wouldn't. And when you get past that phase, I think there's definitely we called it the Bubba factor, right? So I've written a couple applications where You're like, oh, it's going to do all these amazing things, and it's going to solve everybody's problems, and then you hand it out to someone, and they do the craziest stuff with it, and it doesn't work right, and it breaks, and it has, falls apart, and you're like, why would I never even done that? Why were they doing it that way, right? So it's definitely like be okay with failing, right? Put it out in a beta phase, have somebody trash it and then rebuild it, right? And then probably last with that is I would suggest, you use AI to build AI, right? Especially when you're coming up with a problem set and you say, solve this for me. And say that AI comes back and I have no idea what you're talking about. And then you reword it and you reword it, right? It kind of gives you some insight as to, and do this with multiple AIs as well, right? If you're doing, Chat GPT or Claude or, Copilot, and they all kind of come back with that, I don't know how to answer it. Maybe you have something there where you have a vein, as far as a problem set that you can solve within that.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Now let's wrap up with a few key takeaways and action items. Vinny?
There we go. Sure. I'd leave the viewers today with the thought that cybersecurity requires leadership, right? It's a leadership issue. So start the conversations with your organization. Again, get that third party if you need to get third parties to with the specific expertise to come on in and help you assess your protections and work with you to implement defensive measures there.
Kyle, do you have any key takeaways?
Sorry, I was on mute. I think biggest thing is, use AI as a tool, not a solution, right? Use it to augment your daily, utilize it to gain some insight you wouldn't have think you would thought of, right? I don't know if that's a good way to say that, but it's something like putting stuff you find, throw it in a Copilot, as long as there's nothing sensitive in it, right? That you're exposing the internet or anything else, right? And try to use it to see if it gives you a different perspective and maybe utilize that and capitalize on that.
Thank you. Dr. K?
I'll say this. Just like I mentioned in my presentation, don't do AI just because others are doing it. If you want to do AI, first understand the basics, understand the concept, understand how you boil down a problem into what AI can process, and then invest in skilled people. And like Kyle mentioned, try. That's a never-ending process.
Thank you. And Bob?
Well, just as we know, collaboration is going to be the key. We don't know what we don't know most of the time. We're stronger together. Let's keep this conversation going.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you to all our speakers and to you, our audience. We hope this session sparked ideas and gave you practical steps to take back to your agency.
And don't forget, we will have resources for you to download, and you can look at this as a tool to use to take us further in our strike team against those smishers and attackers, utilizing AI to our benefit.